All right, so if given some test scores and we had to find the average, we know we can add the scores together and divide by however many scores there are to calculate the average. But what if they give us some of the test scores and the average and instead ask you to find the missing score? That's when we work backwards. So for example, number one, Quinn's test scores are 95, a 90, and an 83. What must he score on his next test to have an average score of 90 on the four tests? So let's go over to my writing paper real quick. We have a 95, a 90, and I believe an 83. Let's check. Great. He wants an average, so he wants to finish off the class with an average of 90. But he's missing a test score. So let's work backwards to figure out what Quinn needs on the last test in order to average a 90. A lot of students do this when they're trying to figure out what they need on their final exam or, whatever they need to finish off the class. So they end up with an A, a B, or some even a C. So in total, there are really 4 total tests. That means in order to get an average of 90, there's some sum that must be divided by the 4 to give you a 90. So if I'm trying to figure out what that sum is, I do the opposite of dividing, which is multiplying. So I'll go ahead and do 90 times 4. That is 360 total points that Quinn needs, that Quinn needs to have in order to end up with an average of a 90. So let's go ahead and add up the total points he's currently sitting at. And we end up with 268. So to figure out what score we need for the last test, we just do the difference of 360 and 268. And that's a 92. So in order to average a 90 overall, Quinn needs a 92 on the last test. And we can verify it by adding up all 4 tests, dividing by 4, and we'll end up with 90. Let's look at our next student. Desiree. Desiree's test scores are 77, a 90, a 66, and an 82. What does she need to score, or what does she need on the last test in order to average an 80 on her test? So it's 77, a 90, a 66, 62, and an 82. Oh, 66. 77, 90, 66, 82, and then there's some missing last test score. She is interested in having an average of an 80. So let's do the same work again. Remember, average is found by having a sum divided by however total many tests there are. Well, for Desiree, we're looking at 5 total tests. So some sum divided by 5 must give us an 80. Well, let's figure out what the sum is by doing the opposite of dividing, which is multiplying. Desiree needs a total of 400 points in order to average an 80. So let's go ahead and add up how many points Desiree currently has. And she currently has 315 points. So how many more points does she need in order to average an 80? Well, we'll do the difference of 400 and 315, and we'll end up with 85 points. So on the last test, Desiree needs an 85. All right, one more. Lawanda. Lawanda's test scores are 85, 97, 76, and 93. What score does she need on the last test in order to average a 90 on her test? All right, so an 85, 97, 76, and a 93. Remember, Lawanda wants an average of a 90. And we know average is found by doing some sum of all your tests together divided by however many there are. I always do that. And there are 5 total tests. So her total points divided by 5 has to be 90. Well, how many total points does she need? We find that out by multiplying to do the opposite of dividing. And that's 450 points that Lawanda needs. Now let's add up how many total points she's currently sitting at. And she currently has 351 points. But she needs 450 total points. So how many more points does she need in order to meet her goal of 450? We'll do the difference. A 99. So in order to average 90% on her test, she'll need to really be perfect on the last one with a 99. Now we can check our work by adding 85 to 97 to 76 to 93 and the 99 and then divide by 5. And yes, that's an average of 90. So that probably indicates to Lawanda maybe she should shoot for something lower, maybe an average of an 80. Let's do that in red real quick. She needs a 99 in order to average a 90. But what would she need to average an 80? Well, if she wants an 80, we will do 80 times 5 to work backwards. That is 400 more, or 400 total points. We already added her first 4 tests together, and it was 351 points. So in order to average an 80, we do the difference between the 400 points she needs, the 351 points she currently has, and look at that. That's a 49. So if she was okay with averaging an 80% on her test, she would only need a 49 on the last test. So anywhere between a 49 and a 98 would probably get her a B on an average, right? Maybe an 89% average, etc. It doesn't matter. Either way, it's a B. But hopefully this was very helpful so you can understand how to work backwards to figure out what score you may need on your last test to average whatever grade you're interested in. Lawanda needs a 99 to average a 90. Desiree needs an 85 to average an 80. And Quinn, he needed a 92 to average a 90. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.